In this lecture, we will talk about things related to the interesting idea of sharing economy. So, sharing economy has becoming very popular in the recent years. Examples include Uber, Grab, and Airbnb. So, under the sharing economy operations, people do not need to own things. So, different people can share a product or a service, a facility at different times. So, that's the basic idea of sharing economy. So for today, we will talk about things related to private transportation, so taxi, Uber, Grab sort of things. Okay, so first of all, for private transportation nowadays, there are three modes. The first one is the traditional taxi. I don't need to introduce what is traditional taxi. We all know that, right? So those are the special cars here in Singapore in yellow color or blue color or any other color. So it's a taxi company. You can hire the car on the street. You can call to hire a car. Or nowadays they also have an app to hire the car. But that's the traditional taxis. You can see them on the streets. The second one is called the private hire car. The example would be Uber for many countries in the world and Grab here in Singapore. Okay, so these cars are not as traditional taxi. They're not like by a company. So the drivers could be anybody. So anybody can be a Uber driver or a Grab driver. So usually you cannot differentiate them on the street, but if you have the app and you call the car, they will send the car to you. Okay. So I believe everybody have used like a Uber or Grab at least a few times. Okay. I actually use them all the time, coming to school or to the airport. Okay. So the third one, which is actually the focus of today, it's called on-demand ride sharing. Okay, or this is called on-demand carpooling. Okay, so first of all, there are two big companies providing this kind of service on the earth. So the one is called Didi Shunfengche in China. The second one is called BlaBlaCar. It's actually in Paris. So first of all, let's for those of you who never used the Shunfengche Didi or the BlaBlaCar, here is an interesting video, very short video to introduce the business modes of BlaBlaCar or on-demand ride sharing. Okay, so after this video, I believe you have some idea of how they run the BlaBlaCar. So let's have the first discussion question. So forget about the BlaBlaCar first. Let's look at the taxi and Uber first of all. Okay, so let's compare the business of Uber and traditional taxi and see what are the major differences between the two. Okay, so we want to look from the economic and operational points of views to compare taxi and private hire car, which means Uber or Grab. Okay, so there are many differences, but let me summarize and to highlight something. So first of all, we look at the supply or the number of drivers. For traditional taxi, the number of drivers is kind of fixed at any point of time because they are hired by the companies. But for Grab or Uber, it's dynamic because not all registered drivers are on the street all the time. So if you look at Grab, for example, we could have a few more than 10-20,000 of drivers in Singapore, but at any point of time, if you want to find all of them, it's impossible. Only a few of them or a portion of them are providing the service on the street. Okay, so the second part is for wage and fare for taxi. It's fixed, as many of you have noticed. So while it's not fixed, we still have like the weekend charge, weekday charge, peak hour charge. But at any point of time, given the time, let's say this is Sunday morning or Wednesday morning, the price or the fare, the rate is fixed, right? So, however, for Uber and Grab, we know that the price and wage could be dynamic. The major example, the very famous example, is the surge pricing invented by Uber. So when there are more people calling the car, the price will be higher. When there are less people calling the car, the price will be lower. Okay? So let's say a little bit more about the dynamic pricing thing. Okay, so for taxi, we know it's fixed price. Okay, so it's fixed supply, fixed wage, and fixed fare. That's for traditional taxi, right? So What is the disadvantage here of having everything fixed? Okay, so there are two things. One is for peak time, the other one is for off-peak time. But for peak time, the thing is, rider cannot get a taxi. Okay, so think about a few years ago without Uber or Grab. For peak hour, if you want to get a taxi, probably you can't, right? So even you call, they will say there's no car available. If you join the very long queue at the taxi stand, you probably need to wait for like an hour. And if you want to just get a car on the street, it's almost impossible. So that is the time. Well, if you think about this as a queuing model, well, when lambda is greater than mu, we mentioned that if lambda is greater than mu, then the waiting time will increase up to infinity. So there's like no way you can wait for a taxi. So even you are willing to pay more, let's say I have an emergency, I need to go to the hospital, or I need to go to the airport to catch a flight, there's no way I can do that. I can't talk to the driver, hey, just drive me, let me cut the queue, I pay you $100. Well, you probably can do that, but that's illegal, right? So even you want to pay more, there's no way for you to get a car for traditional taxi. On the other hand, for off-peak time, taxi cannot get a rider. Okay, so let's say this is a 3 p.m. Sunday afternoon or like 2 p.m. Monday afternoon. At that time, it's off-peak hour for taxi. We will see lots of taxis available, empty cars waiting at the taxi stand of hotels, malls, or on the street. There's nobody to hire the car. So at that time, right? So there are a lot of waste, right? So it is actually better to offer a discount to have more riders, right? So, well, compared to buses, sure, taxi cannot be as cheap as buses, but if let's say for off-peak hour, the taxi is only $5, $6 higher than the bus or MRT, there'll still be more people taking the taxi, right? So, well, it might be better if we offer a discount to riders. So at least we have some rides, the taxis and the time of the drivers will not be wasted. It is also better to actually have less taxis on the street, right? So when we have less cars, we'll have less congestion, we'll have less emission, right? So if we, at 3 p.m. or 2 p.m., if we do not need that many cars on the street, it is better if we can have less of them. But for traditional taxi, you can't do that, right? Because they're hired, they work for 10 hours a day. No matter this is peak hour or off peak hour, they will be there on the street. And the price is fixed. Okay, so let's compare with Uber or Grab, the private hire car. Well, the very important advantage here is the dynamic supply, dynamic wage, and dynamic fare. Okay, so why surge pricing? Why Uber have such surge pricing thing? Well, you know what? At the beginning of the launch of surge pricing, many people do not like it. Say, hey, the taxi was $10, but for peak hour they charge for 40. Well, sure, we may not feel good on that, but still that's a very important and very useful thing. Okay, so surge pricing is actually used not to just earn big money, but actually to match supply and demand. For peak hour, we have the high price. This is to make sure that those who really need a ride can always get one. So if you really need a ride, you have an emergency, you need to go to the hospital or the airport. If you're willing to pay more, you can definitely get a car. Even you see the charge is now like 3 times, 4 times. As long as you want to pay, there's always a car for you. For off-peak time, this the third price is actually to keep just enough cars on the street. Because for off-peak time, the price will be very low. And then for some drivers, when they say, well, now if I drive for half an hour or drive for 10 kilos, I can only earn $10. It's not too high, then I won't drive it. So this will actually reduce the demand, and then when the price is lower, there'll be higher. Sorry, this is to lower the supply and to higher a little bit the demand. So we just need enough cars on the street. We don't need everybody to be on the street. So basically, to make it very simple, the system dynamics of surge pricing is like this. So there are two parts, right? For peak hour, the supply is lower than demand. So then we will make the fare and the wage, we increase the wage and the price. When the wage or price increases, there will be more drivers, right? Because it will be more attractive